we have a new narrative shift that's dropped from the Rolling Stone. And if it's on the Rolling Stone, then I already know this is going to be disseminated against other outlets. Hopefully, I will be able to find an article or two that somewhat correlates with this so we can look at something that's so similar so we can just see that what this is just rebranding the narrative, because we know that that's what the corporate press does so perfectly, and it's what they've done so consistently for so long. So, here we have January 6th, the topic of discussion for today's video. And January 6th, which was supposed to be the greatest insurrection that's ever breached the shores of American democracy, the greatest threat to the control of the United States, is realistically what it was. And I understand why this was a danger and a threat, because there was actual violence that was committed that day. There were people that were assaulting police officers and violating property rights. And if there's any right that should be protected and government should uphold, and the only right I would argue that government actually should uphold, is the protection of property rights, because that is the one fundamental natural right that no one should be able to take away from you, is the right of your person and your property. So, let's go ahead and get into this. And what we see is that Ray Epps is suing Fox News. Dominion did it first, and now Ray Epps is stepping into the fold to come up to bat. What I can't get over about this is the way that the Democratic congressional establishment and the narrative through the media lens is completely shifting. It went from the fact that this was such a dangerous and violent protest and all of these people should be maligned and these Trump supporters are dangerous and MAGA should be looked at as domestic terrorists because these people are willing to challenge the value of democracy and they're willing to press on the state house. And realistically, when they're saying, oh, well, they're challenging our democracy, when they say our democracy, they mean our hegemony. And what the Trump supporters did on January 6th was they breached the Capitol building. And what the Capitol building is it's not just a state building. It's their religious building. Because this is something that needs to be taken in greater context, is that no matter who you are, even if you are someone who is fundamentally non-religious, you still subject yourself to a religious structure and how you operate and orient yourself in the world. Whether you know it or not, it's simply how we all operate. It's something that the ancients understood, and much like many ancient knowledge that's been lost in recent times, we simply have lost this understanding. Let's go ahead, jump into this article, and see the narrative shift. Rolling Stone is officially throwing pillow shots at the Trump supporters who were at January 6th. What we see here is that Trump voter sues Fox News after Tucker Carlson lies ruined his life. This is about defamation. So, we're going to start with the title. Trump voter sues Fox News. I have never heard them use such soft rhetoric about the people that were at January 6th or the people that committed the actions on January 6th as to going into the Capitol. Simply referring to Ray Epps as a Trump voter, I've never heard it. It's the softest language I've ever heard, and it almost seems like they're trying to cultivate goodwill around this individual rather than malign them like they've done consistently with so many people throughout the corporate press. And I mean everyone from like the teenager who was protesting on January 6th to the old lady who was caught walking between the red velvet ropes. They have persecuted these people with such a heinous degree of verbiage that I would argue it's only realistically astute to observe the fact that, well, why are you throwing pillow shots now? Why are you being so kind to this one individual that so many people are so skeptical about? The fact that he may be a federal informant, that so many people from the left and the right, from the progressive to the conservative, from every spectrum of independent media to some of the legacy media, from people on Fox News to Newsmax to News Nation to the Black Socialist Network to Jimmy Dore to Glenn Greenwald, all of these people are asking genuine questions. Who is this guy? Who is this barrel-chested man that was screaming, we need to go into the Capitol? And the corporate press doesn't want to ask those questions. And what they will do is they'll obfuscate it and say, oh, this poor man, look at the fact of how Tucker Carlson ruined his life. It's like, you ruined your life. You took the action to go there and be the person who was saying, we need to go into the Capitol. If you're not a federal provocateur, why would you dare say something so absolutely stupid? I understand you may be co-opted by the fundamental of, like, group ideological think, and that the mob may have co-opted you, and effectively you were operating on an ideal that, yeah, I feel robbed, I feel like we must go into the Capitol. But you were wrong to do so, and to obfuscate the blame onto someone else is ridiculous. Here we see Ray Epps, a two-time Trump voter from Arizona who found himself at the center of what a wild January 6th conspiracy, is suing Fox News for defamation. The lawsuit alleges that the network, particularly its former host Tucker Carlson, painted Epps as an undercover federal agent in order to push a conspiracy that the FBI helped orchestrate the riot at the Capitol. In order to vilify Donald Trump and all his supporters, we see the fact that in the aftermath of the events of January 6th, Fox News searched for a scapegoat to blame other than Donald Trump or the Republican Party. The suit reads that eventually they turned up on their own, telling a fantastical story in which Ray Epps, who was a Trump supporter that participated in the protests on January 6th, was an undercover FBI agent and was responsible for the mob that violently broke into the Capitol and interfered with the peaceful transition of power for the first time in this country's history. Let's go ahead and break this one down. In the aftermath of the events of January 6th, I'm surprised it didn't refer to the fact that this was an insurrection and dangerous, and the fact that a police officer was killed, the fact that they keep mentioning consistently, despite the fact that it is not true and proven not true, that Brian Sitnick, the police officer who died days later, they consistently push this narrative that there's a police officer that died because he was maced to death on January 6th. The only person that died on January 6th was Ashley Babbitt when she got shot in the throat. So, here we see, eventually they turned up on their own, telling a fantastical story in which Ray Epps, who was a Trump supporter that participated in the protests of January 6th, was an undercover FBI agent and was responsible for the violent mob that broke into the Capitol. They didn't say he was responsible for the violent mob. They said the fact that if this person is a federal provocateur, then it's very likely that he is not the only one. So, they're not saying Ray Epps is responsible. They're saying, is it the intelligence agencies and the people who are responsible for this? Is the FBI, who simply operates as the domestic arm of the CIA, are they responsible for this? Hold on. And they started questioning it. And in the process of questioning it, the regime media and the establishment press reared their heads and attacked anyone maliciously that dared question it. The conspiracy theory which Carlson pushed repeatedly on his show stems from a video of Epps telling protesters the night before the attack to peacefully enter the Capitol the following day, which he did not use those words. Its onlookers then start chanting, "Fed, Fed, Fed." Epps is also seen on video in January 6 encouraging people to march to the Capitol. Epps has not been arrested for his involvement, and Carlson and others have alleged the Justice Department is protecting him because he was working with the FBI, which many people have speculated about, and they do not answer proper questions. When the FBI was interrogated by Congress and they were asked questions by, I believe it was Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and a couple other members of the Freedom Caucus. I believe Thomas Massey and a couple others. What I found so endlessly fascinating about it is they asked this lady from the FBI, were there federal informants and provocateurs at January 6th fomenting dissidents? And what she says is, she sits there and they say, yes or no. So, it's a simple yes or no. That is the easiest question you can possibly answer. Simple yes, simple no. And she says, I cannot answer that question. Why is it that you cannot answer that question? If the answer was no, you would simply say it, I would assume. And if the answer was yes, I would assume you would obfuscate and not answer and say that, well, I simply can't answer that question because I don't know. And it's not that they don't know, they do know. It's simply that answering this question truthfully, if this case is actually true and that there were federal agents there and federal provocateurs, this incriminates the FBI greatly. And this would be effectively demonizing and deeming, it would be demonizing the FBI and deeming January 6th an effective false flag, which could be looked at by so many people as just the way that the CIA operates abroad, the FBI is now doing domestically. So, the lawsuit, which was filed in the same Delaware court as the defamation suit Fox settled with Dominion Voting Systems for $787.5 million, wow, what an amount, alleges that Epps got caught up in the narrative that the election was stolen. Epps is a poorly cast villain for Fox and Mr. Carlson, it reads. He's not the villain. He's simply someone that was used as a piece of information to infer other things. It's not that Epps is the villain. The villain is the establishment. The villain will always be the establishment. Prior to 2022, Epps has had consistently voted Republican. He's a former Marine who voted for Donald Trump twice. He was an avid and loyal Fox viewer and a fan of Mr. Carlson's. When Fox, through his on-air personalities and guests, told his audience that the 2020 election had been stolen, Epps was listening. He believed Fox, and then Epps kept hearing the Trump supporters that they should let their voices be known and head to January 6th for the Capitol and go to Washington, D.C. Okay. I fumbled that at the end, but nonetheless, you get what I mean. They went to January 6th in Washington, D.C., and Epps took that to heart. Here it says, Carlson's lies have totally upended Epps' life. With the lawsuit, nothing he and his wife have received threatening voicemails and emails and text messages. The Epps had to hire security to protect their farm in Arizona, but the harassment became so intense that they were forced to move at great personal cost. Epps' wife had even given up her dog breeding business. The emotional and psychological effects of the threats and the attacks cannot be overstated, the lawsuit reads. Indeed, they very well may dwarf the economic consequences. Which, it's a shame if this is actually the case and this person is exactly who he claims he is, and he's being persecuted by people who are average individuals to the media class, to the political class. That's tragic, and that's really sad. But that's if who he said he is who he says he is. And a lot of evidence points to otherwise, but I'm not going to sit here and speculate and say that's absolutely the truth, this man's a Fed, because we simply don't know. But what we do know, his actions were suspicious, and the fact that the government and the corporate media establishment and the Democratic arm of the congressional wing of the establishment are defending this man en masse, just like Adam Kinzinger is saying the fact that we shouldn't go after sovereign citizens such as Mr. Epps because it's wrong, because it's persecution from the government, da-da-da-da-da. He tweeted something along these lines. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you were perfectly okay with persecuting literally everyone else that was there. But this one guy, this one mysterious guy that's literally saying the thing that you are mad that everyone did, go into the Capitol, you're saying, no, we should leave this man alone. It's absolutely absurd. Carlson's lies of January 6th have spread well beyond Fox. Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee pushed the idea that the FBI was behind the attack during a hearing on Wednesday featuring the FBI Director Chris Wray. This notion that somehow the violence on the Capitol of January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by the FBI and its sources and agents is ludicrous, Wray said after he was asked about Ray Epps. Okay, so it'd be one thing if you just have like one article like this and you're like, oh, okay, well, I see there's this person and they have their perspective, and it's somewhat an opinion piece and they're covering this defamation suit. But realistically, at least there's nothing else that's absolutely mirroring the same exact sentiment and echoing it solely for the fact of just drilling something into your head. Like you had a nail and they were just trying to hammer it in consistently. Thankfully, there's nothing like that. But also, thankfully, we at least have Jack Posobiec to show that this is the case. I found these articles, but I don't feel like going into them because I'm not going to make this video as long as it should be if I wanted to cover all of these articles. It ended up being 40 minutes, and this is not worth that time. Here we see from the WAPO, New York Times, Bloomberg, and the Rolling Stone are now referring to January 6th as an insurrection or even a riot because they're now defending Ray Epps. January 6th is now rallies, demonstrations, and protests. I remember when it was just an insurrection, a riot, a threat to democracy, a dangerous threat for MAGA Trump supporters, the deplorables of the country, the despicable people, just like all this wild shit. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, Joe Biden ran on bringing people together. This seems like you're fomenting division. So here we see from the Washington Post, Ray Epps attended the pro-Trump rallies in Washington in January 2021, but was not among the people to have found to have breached the Capitol building and has not been charged for his conduct. In subsequent weeks, then Fox News says da-da-da-da-da, which we're not going into that. But here we see, like I was talking about, pro-Trump rallies. That's what January 6th is now to the corporate press, a pro-Trump rally. Interesting. What's known about the man, a two-time Trump voter named Ray Epps, is that he took part in a demonstration in Washington that day and the night before. That's all it is? It's just demonstrations? You can see how the goalpost is shifting subtly and slightly. And here we see Fox sued by Trump supporter accused of inciting January 6th riot. A former Marine who voted for Donald Trump has joined the January 6, 2021 protests. I remember when they were being real sticklers over people using the determinative and declarative statements of either protest or riot when it comes to the Black Lives Matter events. Why is this not a thing now? Why is it that it's just a pro-Trump rally? It's simply a demonstration. Don't worry, my friend, it's just a protest on January 6th, when before it was an insurrection and a coup and a threat to our democracy. Seems like we've got a bit of a narrative shift here, friends. That's all I've got for this. Give this a thumbs up if you like it, a thumbs down if you didn't. Be safe, tell someone you love them, stay lovely, stay great. Peace.